What exactly is the new national curriculum framework and how does it impact different states?
In a country as diverse as ours, it's very difficult to expect every child to study exactly the same thing as every other child.
Right.
But then what is it that must be in common among them? So that we are a country and that we have that minimum degree of commonality which makes us belong to the same space. So that's the reason why the idea of a national curriculum framework came about. So a framework essentially spells out some of the key broad policy requirements. It gives its take on the context, where the country is headed. So for example, if the country wants to be a knowledge economy, then it will develop things accordingly. If a country wants to be in a situation where the economic opportunity is not necessarily high-tech, but is available to every single individual in a certain way, it will evolve something else. So the NCF, the role is to guide states in making their own curriculum.
What are some of the failings of the NCF 2005 that prompted the need for a new national curriculum framework?
Education is a lot about building the castle in the air and then putting the foundation below it. If you stop a person on the street and you say, listen, I want to ask you, your child is in school, when this child has completed 10 years of education, apart from a job, what else do you want to see in your child? This person will say, I want the child to be confident, I want him to think for himself, or I want him to be socially adjusted, whatever. He'll name 5 things. And those 5 things which are named in 10 seconds, you can spend 10 years and you can't be sure you will develop them. So when you make a curriculum, you're at the back, the important question is not what should happen, but how should we get to the point that it does happen. And I think the NCF 05 completely failed to look at this. The first thing it didn't really look at was, ground realities. To give you one example of ground reality, which didn't work out, the NCF assumed there are 1,000 hours of teaching. Nowhere do you get more than 800 hours of teaching. It's closer to 700, even less. It did not take into account that one teacher teaches more than one class in about 70% of our schools. So when you make something assuming that it will have so many hours, and you don't, and you actually get teachers who are dealing with 3 grades in the same time, then there is even less time. The situation is more complex and your pedagogy is not designed for that. Your pedagogy is designed with the assumption that one teacher will teach one class at one time, then you can be sure that it will not work. The sort of strongest example that I can give of this is that when I was shown the textbooks that came out for the NCF by the NCERT for the first time, I said from 20 feet away, there are 3 things that can be said about them. One, the size is so large that in the crowded government schools, when you open the book, children are on the floor, and when you open the book, they'll overlap. They can't even read it properly. Then, there are so many pages in that book that you assume so many hours and they don't exist. And lastly, I used to work in National Book Trust earlier and I had some sense of printing. So I said, these books must have cost about 50 rupees or so. So I was told, yes, it is about 55 rupees, but with the subsidy, it becomes 35. So I said, then the states cannot give it for free, which is what India was doing at the time and still does. So if it cannot be given to children for free, if it cannot be completed in the year that you have, and if you cannot even open it fully in the classroom, so how does it matter how good the textbook is? Secondly, he did not define this whole thing in operational terms. So when literally we have 1 million plus teachers, we have millions of parents, they need to understand what this curriculum is and what is expected. They are still in the world where they believe that if you do not beat a child, how will the child learn? And you come in with something like this, but you then make it in this professional language which everybody cannot access. It will not disseminate. The NCF talked a lot about integration between subjects. But when it made the textbook for class 1, it made a separate language book and a separate maths book. especially in young age groups, what happens is that for children, the world around them is one. It does not exist in silos, in separate, discrete things. So at a later point, you need to have cross-curricular linkages. So if you are looking at one thing, you can see it from different dimensions. And now in a kind of current scenario, this ability to link across different disciplines is extremely valued. So though the NCERT talked about it, but when it came to delivering it, it was not able to do it the way it could have been done. The last reason why this happened was that there was very little budget put into this. For example, the NCERT gave all the SCRTs only 10 lakh rupees in the beginning to work on the NCF. That is not even a day's budget for a state. No. So if you really want to make it happen, then you have to make sure that that the system is staffed, that everybody is capacitated, that what is required to deliver it on the ground is actually made available, that the communities are empowered. There are several things that have to happen for this to work. So you have to put your money where your mouth is, otherwise it doesn't work.
The National Education Policy of 2020 brought a wide number of changes to India's education policy framework. What are they and how might they impact the NCF?
In terms of going beyond content into what 21st century requirements from subjects really are. For example, if you take the case of science, when I was young, the important thing was to have a lot of factual information on your hand. And if you didn't, you were not a knowledgeable person. But today, anybody with a mobile phone can tell me any of that. So what use is having that information? What is more important is what is globally referred to as scientific literacy, which is knowing what the right question is and getting the right thing in the right way, and connecting it and then making use of it and so on. So to that extent, since the world of knowledge itself has changed, there is a clear requirement that something of that kind should happen. The NEP also talks of a couple of other things which are relevant. One, it says that the scholastic subjects, if they could be reduced to make more room for the arts, for sports, and also offering more choices to students, incorporating more vocational aspects and building in performance standards for teachers. These are many requirements which make the NCF imperative in a way it was not earlier.